Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Matt from Untrained Terrain, and today we'll be talking about Ricardo, aka Richard Ramirez, or as he'll later be known, the Night Stalker, for reasons we'll get into. Born February 29th, 1960, as the youngest of 5 siblings in El Paso, Texas, Ricardo Ramirez, aka Richard Ramirez, had a tough childhood. His parents, Julian and Mercedes Ramirez, were just regular folk that immigrated from Mexico. Now, Ricardo, or Richard, grew up with a very troubled childhood. He frequently was abused mentally, physically, emotionally by his father, and this led to brain damage by the time he was 10 years old, and, unbelievably, cocaine use by the time he was 10. Richard grew up in a small neighborhood in El Paso, Texas, and school wasn't really his thing. Other classmates would refer to him as creepy and odd. By the time he was 20, Richard was a frequent cocaine user and was really into drugs. And he started dabbling into the occult and witchcraft, I guess you could call it, the more spooky side of things. Now, Richard had an older cousin, Manuel. Manuel Ramirez was a Vietnam veteran, and he liked to take Richard out and show him how to peeping Tom, I guess you could call it. Kind of creepy stuff, right? But they would go out and they would creep on women getting undressed and whatnot. And this really started to grow in Richard and become kind of an obsession. And Manuel would show him pictures from war of things that he did to prisoners, war prisoners. And these things were, well, frankly, they were disgusting. I don't really want to get into it, but just know that it was evil. And Richard loved it. He couldn't get enough of it. Richard wasn't just your average kid in America. He idolized his older cousin for the gruesome and disgusting things he did as a U.S. soldier in Vietnam. And as Richard got older, he started to get a taste for the more evil and sadistic side of himself. Now, on May 4th, 1970, Miguel Ramirez fatally shot his wife in the face while Richard was present. He would later be exonerated of this crime and released from a mental hospital in 1977. It was almost as if Richard had the perfect ingredients in his childhood to make him into the kind of person who would commit the atrocities and the disgusting crimes he would commit later in his life. Now, in connection with his Satanism and his taste for the occult he had a keen interest in, he started to dabble in crime and started breaking into homes and stealing and, more intense stuff as he got older. He became more of a criminal and more of a harder criminal and harder crimes. As his crimes progressed, they became more evil and sadistic and had a more gruesome side to them. Now, Richard's crimes didn't really blossom until he moved to California in 1982, and this is really when it started to come out of him, the rage and the sick side of him. As he grew more into a criminal and began burglarizing homes, he began to be able to cover his tracks way better than before. Richard Ramirez began a series of rapes and murders that would terrify and just horrify the residents of California. People in Los Angeles no longer left their doors unlocked like before. The news had them terrified as they were referring to the person committing these crimes as the Night Stalker, and nobody was left unharmed. Richard Ramirez's first victim was May Leung, and she was found in the basement of the San Francisco hotel where Richard was living at the time. She was stabbed to death and raped before being hung from a pipe in the basement by Richard. Now, this first murder is really what started his rage and his spree of crimes in California. Later, he moved to LA, and his next victim was a 79-year-old woman. She was found nearly decapitated in her Los Angeles apartment. On September 20th, 1989, Ramirez was convicted on all 43 charges, 13 counts of murder, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. Richard Ramirez was sentenced to death by gas chamber. Los Angeles Judge James F. Nelson issued his ruling without comment before a packed courtroom at the conclusion of an arduous 29-day preliminary hearing in which 143 prosecution witnesses took the stand. At Richard's first court appearance, he came into the courtroom, raised his hand, and had a pentagram drawn on it, and yelled, "Hail Satan," in front of all the spectators. Ramirez later died of complications secondary to B-cell lymphoma at Marin General Hospital in Green Bay, California on June 7, 2013, ending this horrific, horrific time. I would like to thank everyone who took the time to watch this video, and if you would like to see more videos like this, please like and subscribe and follow for more.